There we go. And we have had some captivating conversations with Nikki online prior to this. So welcome to Synergy. This is a recovery show and we keep it casual here. And Nikki's joining us from California today. And, we've had some interesting topics topics du jour. And so I didn't even set questions for this, but, I was really interested in your background and what got you into your line of work. You're working as a therapist, and I'll put all the credentials and alphabet soup down in the description afterwards. But you have some interesting stories. So I'd like to hear what made you choose this line of work and the population you work with.
Well, I've always been, I guess what it's come down to, the last few years, I've realized something about myself, that pretty much everything that I do, because you and I got acquainted through Facebook, through several groups, and then it turned out that you also joined my private cooking group, which, a lot of people didn't do. But see, I think that everything that I do, when it comes right down to it, it comes down to being a carer, how we care for people by helping them, how we care for people by cooking for them, just in general, what we do to care for people. And the origin of this particular realization was that my son, when he was applying to college, I mean, now it's a little bit scary. He's halfway through. But the thing is that when he was applying, one of the companies that, by the way, wanted much too much money to coach him, so to speak, said, well, when you do essays for college, you have to have, they made it look like a bicycle spoke, where the zero in the middle or the circle is a central passion, and then how do all the spokes, everything that you do, correlate to that central passion. Well, from, in talking to him about it, because again, he no longer needs this for college, but it might be useful for him making application to veterinary college, where he wants to be a vet, a doctor. So what I said to him was, well, you know something? You are studying biology and you are a music minor. He is one who told me, because this is not something, by the way, that I understand much of, but he told me that music theory is actually a course really, or the essence of it, which he loves, is problem solving. So I distilled it for him as we talked, at your core, you're a problem solver. At me and my core, as I really thought about it, yes, I solve problems. He goes, well, Mom, you solve problems too. It's true. But my central passion is as a carer. I always wanted, I think, to be a counselor. I actually was a peer counselor in high school, helping other students. But I grew up, unfortunately. Now, Paul, you more than anybody understand the stigma of mental health, how it used to be something just wasn't talked about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, I definitely came from a family where that was the case. And when I told my mother and father, maybe I wanted to go into counseling, and maybe I wanted to, be a therapist or a counselor, a psychologist, they said to me, came from, Jewish immigrant parents, and they said, no, that's for Michiganers. Go be a lawyer better, go be a real doctor, Okay, fine. Well, long story short, I took a degree in the social sciences. I have a bachelor's from UC Berkeley. I have a master's from University of Pennsylvania in communications, but I started off my career in the corporate world, but still found that even though I was in advertising, I was in marketing, I always somehow found myself mentoring and coaching or counseling people who worked under me. And then came the arrival of Sonny Boy. And with that, it took me a very long time to get him. I won't bore you with the gory details of the problems with pregnancies, the miscarriages and such, but let's just suffice it to say that by the time he was on board, and I kept talking to God and saying, if you're serious, don't, you just keep on going with this. If you're serious, let this exam be okay. If you're serious, well, it was okay. And almost 10 months later, he popped out. Well, he didn't pop out. We like to joke that big head of his necessitated, even though I planned to labor naturally, after 14 hours naturally, and my doctor saying, I got to get him out of there. I said, okay, go ahead, I'm ready. He said, well, I see him stressing. I just said, go ahead, just bring him out, please. We like to joke that he had a giant head and a skinny little body. We like to joke that the big head got stuck. So anyway, so he came on the scene. And at that point, I had been working in the corporate world, yes, in America, but also for a Japanese company. They pay you very well, but they demand an awful lot of you. Well, in my case, it was 60 to 70 hours a week, lots of travel. And I realized, well, I can't do both. I'm either going to have to cut my losses and find something else, or I'm going to have to hire a nanny to care for him, to do my job. And I thought, well, you know what? I didn't bring him into this world to have somebody else raise him. I was still going to work, but I would at least be there for him in the morning when he got up and when he went to bed at night. So I went ahead and I worked there for a little while. They tried to accommodate me, but then it became clear I wasn't giving enough to the family or to them. And so I went ahead, I started my own marketing consultancy to bring some income in. And I asked my husband, I said, well, I really have always wanted to counsel. I want to start this class. It's a couple nights a week. Will you watch the baby? Sure. So I got into this. And then I found very early on, well, I really, even though I grew up in, where I counseled the other fellow students, it was kind of a privileged high school, not a special, not an extra needs population at all. By the way, I don't refer to things as special needs. I refer to them as additional or extra needs, because I think that's what it is. I grew up, in a pretty nice neighborhood, and the kids were pretty normal. But I quickly realized with counseling and doing rotations, I had little interest in coaching, and going into private practice, coaching more affluent people, because some of these people, not to judge it, but I just wasn't, I understand that for some women, the fact that their husband only bought them a Jaguar instead of the Mercedes they wanted, or bought them a Sapphire when they wanted an Emerald. Okay, I understand, but it just wasn't my thing. And so I actually fell into the counseling, with special needs, with extra needs populations, quite by accident. At first, with addiction, I'm going to level with you. I always thought, well, addiction, isn't that kind of silly? Why do people let themselves get into it? Until I realized that I myself in high school had an addiction myself. Now, you can say that it was, a therapist I talked to much later said it was more about control. I had an eating disorder. That's true. It's about control, but it's also a type of addiction. Yes. Addiction, whatever substance we have, it's a comforting thing. And as I believe I told you, what I've come to understand about addiction is that, you're running from something. And all of a sudden, a friend comes next to you, whether it's food, alcohol, drugs, and runs next to you and gives you comfort. And so it's good because together you're outrunning the thing. Eventually, that friend of yours jumps on your back and you're thinking, it's fine, because we're still outrunning the thing. But then eventually the friend starts choking you. And then what I came to realize and understood, and it was a client of mine who explained it this way, that something is your addiction and the thing you're running from is yourself. So what is it about oneself that person is running from? You're trying to escape the discomfort. Here's the rub. When you have an eating disorder, you can't, unlike giving up drinking, giving up drugs, you cannot give up food. You can't give up eating.
Yes.
So it makes it a little bit tougher. And so at that point, I realized, okay, lady, you're not so high and mighty. You yourself have had an addiction. The other thing is, I've come to understand that addiction is what it is. It is not a choice. It is an illness and must be treated as such, like anything else. And so it's not a choice. People don't choose to always, do the heroin. Once you're addicted, it's hard as hell to stop it. but people don't choose that. That's an illness. Addiction is an illness. And so I became more interested in that, but then I took it a step further. I was really interested in, the veterans that had served the country, PTSD, schizophrenia. I was an anthropology and psych major in college. And one of the hot buttons in those days was, okay, well, is schizophrenia and manic and things like that, are these biologically based or are these psychologically based? Is it behavior based? Well, I've come to I've come to realize something, and where I was interested in the time in figuring out biological causes of things, I came to the conclusion pretty shortly thereafter, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, who the hell cares? It doesn't matter if it's biological or if it's behavioral. And the truth is that no, schizophrenia and manic are definitely genetic conditions, but my concern with that, or saying anything, whether it was that or whether it was talking about homosexuality, another hot button in those days, oh gee, is that genetically caused? So what are you going to start to do? Start splicing everybody's genes to make it stop? So I felt it was a slippery slope. And my thought is, when it comes to treating things, I really couldn't care less. My interest is in treating them. And then a friend of mine got me to join, because I'm also an ordained minister, said, well, we're doing a prison ministry. It's called PVS, which is a ministry service for federal prisoners, but anybody can join. Prisoner visitation service. And the whole crux of that is that I don't know. I know, you said you've spent some time in the prison system. Not sure if that was state or federal, but if state, okay, that's a little bit different. In federal, they basically regard you as, the government. If you're in for 5 years, you're the government's property for 5 years. And that means, just like a cardboard box, they can ship you off anywhere. Your family might be, and you're in Rhode Island, for example, your family might be in Rhode Island. So if, let's say, you were in a federal facility in Rhode Island or Connecticut, because it's closest, or Massachusetts, they could say, oh, let's take Paul and let's ship him to California. He's low security. We'll just put him there. And plus there's a drug rehab program. Well, fine and wonderful, except for the fact that they've just taken you away from your family. And it's been proven in rehabilitation that connections with friends and family are among the most important things when it comes to coming out and not reoffending again. Having community support is everything. And I guess that it's also really opened my eyes to just the idea. And as you know, I also look at it metaphysically, and the illusion that we're all separate, is just that. It's an illusion. Yeah. And so the idea that, oh no, this bad drug person is over here, and oh no, I'm, over here. Well, and I'm all high and mighty. No, sorry. That's not the way it works. Everything, we as a community, work together. And it's also been said that you can tell a lot about a society by the way they treat their prisoners. And if you look, say, at Norway or Netherlands and the correction system there compared with here. Now, I've heard the argument time and time again, yeah, but Norway, Netherlands are tiny countries, we can do this or that. Well, we used to have a system in this country that was restorative or rehabilitative as opposed to strictly punitive.
Yeah.
Nobody more than me would like to see that come back, because even in the federal system, it used to be that federal prisoners could work, could get jobs there, could get training. A lot of those RDAP programs and the professional programs have been cut. There still is an RDAP program, a drug treatment program, but they are hard as hell to get into. You have to serve a certain amount of time before they'll even let you in. And it's varying levels of success, I would say. But I guess that I'm more interested, as strange as this sounds, when I went into the prison and I would be talking to, the people that I would visit with there, it was almost as if I felt that it was a calling. And at the very least, and people who said, well, gee, why do you do that? Oh, that's so dumb and all. Well, you know what? The truth is, and you probably know this because you too are a giver, we never give without receiving ourselves. And what did I receive? Grace. Because the minute I would walk out of Terminal Island, which is where I was visiting, there was never a time, Paul, that I walked out of there and got into my car where I, A, didn't give thanks that I was allowed to leave, and B, when I stopped at the market to buy some provisions for dinner or whatever, never did I not give thanks for the fact that I was able to go to the store, able to buy something for dinner, and able to go home and cook it for the family. You know, never did I not give thanks for that. And so I realized it's important stuff. I mean, one can't go into this for the money because, you know, that's it. I mean, the money is okay, but it's nothing great if you're in the game. And not only that, but it's also my thought that, well, even if you're a therapist, you got into it to help people. And so it's like most people, like say there's somebody having a heart attack on the plane. If there's a doctor on board, 9 times out of 10, the doctor is going to help. Well, that's what they're trained to do. Okay, so that's what you're supposed to do. You don't get brownie points for doing what you've pledged to do and what you're supposed to do. So I think that when it comes right down to it, it's just, you know, if you're doing this work, it's because you connect with it, you want to help here. Admittedly, it isn't for everybody. And so, but it takes somebody, you know, who understands it. And I would say somebody who gets a take from it themselves, or who understands that even if it doesn't feel like a thankful job, it feels thankless at times, you do get something from it. And the feeling of really feeling that you've had an impact on people, I can't tell you how amazing it is. This one young man that I counseled, that when he was going to leave and we were talking about him leaving and, well, how do you feel about that? And, oh, well, my sister's coming to pick me up. Great. I know a good restaurant, because he had to be back in San Diego by a certain time. I said, oh, 4 or 5 hours. Okay, you have time to stop in Long Beach for breakfast, go to this place. You know, you'll have a great meal with your sister, then go to the halfway house. And then he spent the rest of the time telling me, you know, I said, well, what do you want to do? Well, I'm going to stay away from my old friends. That's good, because he was in for drug reasons. He told me that through the RDAP program, he never thought that dealing cocaine hurt anybody because the people were going to get it anyway. Now he realizes it did, though. And he just wants to go and make people's kitchens beautiful. And I just thought, wow, that's really cool. And when it was time to go, he hugged me not once, but 3 or 4 times. He couldn't stop hugging me. He was so excited. And to see that and to see him launching. And by the way, at least in this program, you're not allowed to keep in touch with people. You have to let it go for a couple of years and then maybe get back. But either way, I don't even need to know. I'm sure that he's doing fine, that he didn't reoffend because he was going to stay away from those people. And I just felt, okay, this is a good one. Doesn't always work, but see, we don't deal in absolutes anyway. But if you can help 2, 3, 4 people out of 100, that's something.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a synergy to that, because usually I found in recovery, and this show is not just recovery from addiction of sorts. It's recovery from a pure material lifestyle, that there is nothing else, and we're just material beings made of atoms and molecules and so on and so forth, and we're going nowhere to nothing for no reason, and utter absurdity. You know, and you mentioned certain things that I consider the paradoxes of religion or of spirituality in particular. You know, when people look at me and they're talking about altruism, altruism is a circle. Because like you mentioned, you know, when I give, I feel very good to give. I'm a giver. I like to do that. And I get something in return from that. You know, the more love that is poured out, the vessel's not empty after. You know, it just keeps refilling. So, you know, I think Mark Twain was the one who said, you know, the 2 best times in your life is when you're born and when you figure out why. And you mentioned a calling. And, you know, my education was in art, and was, you know, I was doing some web design and stuff like that when I could, before the addiction got too bad. And when I got sober and I started recovering, because there's a big difference between dry sobriety of just abstinence and actual recovery and actual change and actual connection and growth and so on and so forth. And when I started to recover, I was diligent enough. I could go back to my old line of work and probably have a pretty lucrative career. If I say something's going to be done on Friday, it'll be done on Friday. And I couldn't. I wanted to work with other alcoholics and other addicts because I had found the next rung on the ladder, something that I didn't know existed. I love your analogy about the friend on the back, and start choking you, because I always tell people that when I discovered drugs and alcohol, that was not a problem. That was the solution to the problem that I was having. I wasn't fitting in socially. I was starting to slack off in school. I was hanging out with some hooligans, and my family didn't have really good answers for why I felt like I felt. They said, just don't think about it. It's hard to just not think about it when bullies are punching you in the head, but the hooligans, the wise council of elders that were around 15, 16 years old had a real solution. And the solution was, here, kid, drink this, smoke this. And suddenly I was like, oh, wow, okay, this is the panacea. This will get me through life. I can just skate by and get this stuff, and I'll feel pretty comfortable in my skin, and everything will be all right. But with addiction, we know how that goes. It doesn't play out very well, and for a lot of us, things get worse and worse. But you're mentioning the food addiction, and I always thought about that. I was like, yeah, that's got to be hard. I can't give up eating. I mean, I drink too much, I can stop drinking. I can completely abstain. I use too much cocaine, and the same thing. But with that, so I always thought that the psychological models for addiction of all or nothing were too much. But the big pharma solutions to those problems of all or nothing, with harm reduction and so forth, using methadone and Suboxone, are lacking extremely. Those particular drugs, I think they're horrible. But we're starting to see some research into, I've had friends who needed to go on medical marijuana for pain, who had solid recovery, who had changed their life, changed their values, worked toward giving back, and so on and so forth. And I'm not just one to hear a person's words and take it for what it is. I watch their behavior. How are they behaving now? Are they starting to lie? Are they starting to do things? And I've seen that certain people will still have good recovery using these more holistic means at times. So I think that there is room for harm reduction and so forth. Now, you've got some, you were telling me a story about a friend who was, personally involved in some violence and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. That was interesting to me, that you had experienced that, and you still choose to do what you do. I guess it is interesting in a way, but I can see why you would. And just talk about that for a minute.
Well, when you say violence, you mean somebody who was a victim of violence?
Yeah, the one where the guy killed a lot of people.
Yes. Okay. Well, what you're talking about is okay. It's my friend Emily, and it was her aunt who was killed. What it was many years ago. You can still look it up. The man's name who did the killing is Stephen Livididis, and Livididis was a drifter who came into Beverly Hills. Annie worked at a very exclusive Beverly Hills jewelry shop, the kind you need to be buzzed in and all.
Mhm.
Among her clients, some very, very high end, type places. One of her clients at the time, I really wasn't in love with him because I knew he was gay even back then, Elton John, but I
Mhm.
did really love his music. I
Yeah.
actually wanted to marry his lyricist at one point. So, but apparently Elton was a customer of Anne. And I remember her telling me, oh, he was so soft spoken and he's very nice, this and that. So this was what had happened. It was a jewelry store heist. Lividitis went into the store, pulled out guns. And, yes, he killed a bunch of people in the store. There was the manager, there was Annie, there was somebody else. And apparently he killed a couple of people execution style, one of whom was Annie. And the reason, his explanation for having killed Annie was because she wouldn't stop crying. I mean, that's just, to you and I, we just don't, to most people, we just don't understand that. And then also one of the things that he did, because, Beverly Hills Police Department, not a lot happens there, but when it does, you better believe they're prepared. They have to be for the kind of people around there, And so what happened was Lividitis was aware that they had sharpshooters around. So what he did was he made the jewelry store manager put on his clothes and walk outside. So when the police shot, they actually shot the manager instead of him.
Wow.
Yeah. So all told, 5 or 6 people died as a result of Lividitis. He eventually was taken, thank God. And it's a damn good thing when you and I talk about, because, I'm preaching to the choir here, Paul, you've seen it. So, a lot of people are in jail when really they'd be better served at a community service center or, or at a recovery center, honestly, for people with hardcore drug addiction, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to just lock them up, because the other sad thing is, we just talked about, when I saw failures in the federal correction system, you're not getting the help you need, is the bottom line, if you're an addict. And so it's probably better to divert that to a place where you don't have to pay security guards. Don't know what prison guards. I don't know what it is in Rhode Island, but in California, it is dismal. There is such a prison guard shortage. These people are making 3 times their salary. You have people who are working as prison guards, not even a high school education, that are making, probably more money than my husband and I combined, just with the triple time and all.
Mhm.
But it doesn't, I'm not putting them down, but the fact is they're not trained to do much of anything other than, keep the peace, and they're trained to respond military style if there's a threat of violence. But for the most part, what one of the men that I counseled said to me, an educated man, he was in there for business fraud, because the prison that I went to was low security. So you had a lot of drug addicts. You also had a lot of white collar crime. And this guy who was white collar crime, I said, well, aren't you worried that this, that, and the other thing might happen? He said, no, prison's a really passive environment. He said, if anyone starts anything up, all they have to do is threaten to take away our commissary, and that's the end of matters. So, and it also occurred to me, learning the system, is that prison, on the other hand, is a wonderful place for 2 types of people. One, the people who never ever want to grow up, who want to be told, sit down now, lie down now, do this, do that, who want to take no responsibility for their lives. They're probably fine in a system like that. And then the other people are, frankly, as you've seen yourself, people who should never be out. To me, Lividitis should never be out. And it's not just because he killed all those people, but his response later. A prison psychologist interviewed him and said, well, are you sorry for what you did? And he said, the guy was like in an alternate reality and not in a good way. He said, well, not very, because I know Jesus forgives me. And see, one thing that does bother me about spirituality in prison is the fact that, these people, they all of a sudden find Jesus, but not for the right reasons. They just use that as an excuse. And he said, well, Jesus forgives me. this guy grew up Greek Orthodox. And so he said, Jesus forgives me, and that's all that matters. Plus, I'm going to get married to this girl and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you shouldn't be thinking about or talking about, you're going to death row. You shouldn't be talking about marrying this girl. You should be talking about making amends. And my friend Emily wanted to go visit him, and she wrote him a letter. And he just said the most callous thing. Well, I can't do anything about that now. And no, I don't want to see you. He had no interest in making anything right. And I just thought, you know what? It's better that you put somebody like that away, because if he were let out tomorrow, he would do it again, because he just doesn't feel any, remorse for anything. He just feels, well, this is what I want. I wanted money. That's why I did the heist. And killing the people, that's just collateral damage. He used those words. And so the thing is, though, you've got the Stephen Livididises of the world, but then you've got a lot of other people who are not like that. And I don't think that a lot of people are like that. I mean, yeah, there are Livididis. There's another guy on death row in California who raped an 11-year-old girl again, and said to her, and you know how they feel about child molesters in prison. But the thing is, when the judge said, do you have anything to say? This guy, Mark Allen Davis, he just said, well, I just want to say that before she died, Polly said to me, just don't do me like my daddy did. In the courtroom. I mean, just the most disgusting thing. And the father just said, go to hell, Davis, or rotten hell, Davis, something like that. Wow. So there are people like that who shouldn't get out. You and I both know it, but then there are a lot of people, but see, that's probably about 20% of people. That I don't believe it to be the majority. I think a lot of people, at least in California, probably Rhode Island too, are there more for drug-related things. And honestly, that's hurting yourself, which is bad enough, But there's a reason why, as a therapist, two of the questions I need to ask if I see somebody who's really in pain is, okay, I need to ask you, let me ask you something. Is it so bad that, for example, there was a young woman that I counseled right at the beginning of COVID. She went to school with my son, and they were more acquaintances than friends, but her mother and I had gotten a little bit closer, during the pandemic through texting and through social media. And her mom said to me, well, do you know anybody, who could counsel her? It's really bad. I said, well, I'm not an adolescence counselor, but I'll tell you what. I said, it's bad right now. She said, yes. I said, have her give me a call. So I talked to her and I said, okay, where your pain, after we talked for a while, I said, okay, where your pain is right now, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0, it's nothing, 10, you can't stand it. Where are you? She said, 11. I said, okay, now I need to ask you a couple of questions. Is it so bad that you've thought about hurting yourself? No. Okay. Is it so bad that you've thought about hurting somebody else? No. Okay. And I said, okay, that's fine. Here's what you do. If it gets to a point where you do feel you want to hurt yourself, you're not going to call me. You're going to call 911. End of it. Okay. Make me that promise. And she did. And then a couple days later, mom calls me to tell me I took her to the emergency room today. And so, it's one of those things where no, you can't allow somebody to hurt themselves. And I'm always so sad when I hear that somebody committed suicide and that they were alone, because it always made me wonder, okay, when you're in pain like that, it hurts like hell. But on the other hand, it should never be the case where it hurts so badly that there's absolutely no help for you. I mean, I've been there later on in life, long, eating disorders, but then much longer. And this is actually when, about when my son was about 3 years old, I started experiencing panic attacks. It's no fun and it hurts like anything, but you go, you get help. The meds did not work for me at all. I actually took them, and it was about 2:00 one day at work. I had to have my assistant drive me home because I, couldn't. And then I said to the doctor, forget it. It's like it feels like a lobotomy. I can't function. And he said, okay. started talk therapy. It didn't go away right away, but in time it started to fade. I need to emphasize I'm not against psychotropic drugs if that's what helps, at least for a while. A lot of people say, well, it's a Band-Aid. Some people, if you're like me, couldn't handle them at all. And you just have to figure out what works for you. But there are many, many, many modalities, many ways to get help. And it just always makes me sad when people can't. Now, by destigmatizing the stigma of mental health, of getting help, that's going to help a whole lot. Not right away, though, and not quickly enough. But I think that's really our first step. We have to let people know that when you're in pain, it's okay to ask for help. In fact, you must. You can't not ask for help. It's a normal thing. We're all reliant on each other. It's not a time for pride. If you need help, get help. It's like there was an old recovery, I think it was for SHIC centers or something that said, please, if you don't get help from us, get help somewhere. That's very much how I feel. I'm also very much in agreement with you about, love put in, love comes out. If you've heard the Beatles song, The End, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Very, very, very true. Through my work and through the idea of needing to study more, having CEU units, and you could study anything you want. That's one of the places I went to, was the Monroe Institute. And what intrigued me was the whole idea that we are so much more than our physical bodies. I've come to believe that, and I do believe that things on the other side do inform the things that we do here. There is knowledge, there is information out there. Lynn McTaggart wrote a book called The Field, where you talk about the field of all possibilities. There is information out there if you ask for it. You don't have to pay anything for it. You don't have to pay for it. If you ask, it's there. I have to credit Dr. Richard Bartlett with with his creation, or at least the naming of matrix energetics, although he himself would tell you, I didn't create the field. It was just there, and I named it, I labeled it. But the thing is that he also said that the work that he did as a chiropractor, where seemingly miracles happen through his hands, he said, I do nothing without the grace of God. So see, whether you believe in God, whether you don't believe in God, believe in Jesus or not, it doesn't really matter. Believe in a universal force, but the field is there. And I can tell you it's a very, very real thing.
I get a pause for 1 second because we're going to run out of time here, Nikki, because I was imprudent and did not subscribe today. Can I log out and we log right back in? Because I'd
Sure.
love to hear more about the Monroe Institute, and we'll just have a two-part thing. So there'll be 2 videos. So there'll be more on my YouTube channel, which is great for my 60 subscribers.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording and log out, and then we will continue with part 2 of Nikki Lennertz, and I'm finding this fascinating. Thank you.